Yeah, I mean, I think gearing our entire economy, like gearing every aspect of industry towards like, I love when we get the Treasury guy to fucking talk about this. You know what I mean? It's
started actually today with some words, which is to try to outline what's going on here. So there are a few issues. Pay, obviously, they want more. Artificial intelligence, which you referred to before, they don't want artificial intelligence to replace either the writers or the actors. I don't know how to chart that, so we'll leave that one there. But let's talk about residuals, which is an interesting phenomenon. So in the motion picture and television industry, writers and directors get residuals, which are additional payments whenever their shows are re-aired as a rerun somewhere or other out there in electronic television world. The issue is that the changing media landscape has affected them because residuals get paid differently if it's on broadcast. They get paid each time it's shown versus streaming, where they're paid by the number of subscribers. Now, let's just do one quick fun fact. Does anybody know how these actors and directors got residuals in the first place? In 1960, there was a similar strike, about 5 weeks, by both groups.
led by Ronald motherfucking Reagan, bitch.
Over this issue of residuals. And that strike was led by the head of...
I don't know why. Dude, it's so funny. He's just like, his cadence is hilarious. Yes, folks, that's right. Care to guess how they got it? I mean, fuck it. I love it. It's great.
The Actors Union, who was Ronald Reagan. Mm-hmm. And Ronald Reagan, of course, went on 21 years later to break the air traffic controllers strike as one of his first acts as president. So that's a little fun fact for you to take away with. But let's talk.
I texted Austin and immediately pops up in the fucking stream. Bottoms are unionizing, question mark.
About what's going on in the industry, which is what is driving a lot of this. So you've had back in 2015, 80% of American households subscribed to cable or to direct satellite broadcasting. That number is now down to 49%. Conversely, back then, 52, roughly half of the country had a streaming service, although they didn't use it much, as I'll show you in a second. Now 80% roughly have it. And so the higher payments from this service went down. The lower payments from this service went up, and that's part of why those writers and directors are on.
There's nothing funnier than this as well, by the way. Someone shouts out to the chatter who for the hat tip. Okay. SEC charges Stephen Ratner in pay-to-play scheme involving New York State Prison Fund. That's right. The Securities and Exchange Commission today charged former Quadrangle Group principal Stephen Ratner, the man you're seeing on television, for participating in a widespread kickback scheme to obtain investments from New York's largest pension fund. The SEC alleges that Ratner secured investments from Quadrangle from the New York State Common Retirement Fund after arranged for a firm affiliate to distribute the DVD of a low-budget film produced by the retirement fund's chief investment officer and his brothers. Ratner then caused Quadrangle to retain Henry Morris, the top political advisor and chief fundraiser for former New York State Comptroller Alan Havesi, as a placement agent and pay him more than $1 million in sham fees, even though Ratner was already dealing directly with then New York State Deputy Comptroller David Loglisi and did not need an introduction to the retirement fund. Fire.
On strike today.
So, Steve, you're talking about how the landscape has changed. And one of those ways, and this is your second chart here, is how traditional television has really struggled. Give us a lay of the land there.
So, not surprisingly, as households gave up cable and moved towards streaming, it had an impact on what they were watching. And so you can see back in 2013, 30% of the watching was on traditional broadcast networks, NBC, ABC, CBS, and so on. 60% was on other cable services, everything from ESPN to Bravo or whatever. But even though a bunch of folks had streaming services back then, they hardly watched them. There are only a couple of them. Now you look at today, 37% of television watching is streaming services, and that is almost double the percentage that watch traditional over-the-air services, and it's actually even more than the number of people who watch cable services. So those, again, provide lower payments to these actors and directors than those, but a huge change in what people are doing. Now, there's another set of competitors that traditional television face as well that affects their bottom line, which are a couple of other services. So TikTok, which barely existed a couple of years ago, now generates $10 billion a year of advertising revenue, which happens to be almost identical to the amount generated by these four top media companies from Comcast, Warner Brothers, Paramount, and Disney. And so that's money out of the pockets of these guys, again, affecting their bottom line.
So, Steve,
yeah, YouTube is a fucking behemoth.
Obviously, eyeballs usually equal dollars, and if fewer people are watching, there's less money around. And your third chart gets into that about how media spending has been shrinking too.
I'm going to take Kai out to pee real quick.
This comes back to what's happening to these companies as a result of all this. So, cable television, broadcast television, you can see half of the revenues essentially have disappeared on an inflation-adjusted basis over a 10-year period. Home video, which is the old business of DVDs and things like that, almost gone. Movie theaters, partly due to COVID, but partly due to changing habits. Spending on adjusted for inflation is back to the levels of 1982. And streaming is up by this amount, $27 billion, but streaming is losing a lot of money for these companies. So net, when you cut through it, again, on an inflation-adjusted basis, their revenues the revenues of this industry have gone down by 36%, $60 billion of lost revenue. And all of that translates into stock prices that are nothing great. So the S&P 500 since 2015 is a bit more than doubled, up 127%. And these traditional media companies are essentially right back where they started from. So clearly the writers and directors have a lot of legitimate questions about their residuals and how they get paid in general. But the media companies have their own set of issues, which is part of why this strike is proving so intractable.
So again, I'm trying to figure out, Steve, as far as these numbers go, you're saying streaming is just terrible for the media companies as far as their long-term revenue streams and their long-term viability.
Well, so far streaming has been a huge money loser, a fair amount of revenue, as I showed you, but a lot of profit losses because there's so many of them and they're so competitive and they've spent so much money on product. Over time, that should rationalize as some of them drop out, merge, and consolidate. But it's not going to be like the good old days where you had a few television networks that effectively functioned as an oligopoly and were able to make profits because they didn't compete that heavily. These streaming services look like they're going to be losing money for a good while to come.
Well, and so what that means, Steve, is, I mean, again, it seems that the only solution for these companies, these media companies, so we're going to see mass consolidation like we saw in the airline industry. If there are too many of them out there, they're cutting up the pie too much, they're losing too much money. It seems like we're going to have, we have 3-4 massive airline companies. Is that where we're going as far as media goes, as far as these streaming services go?
Yeah, we will, I think, definitely see consolidation among the streaming services. There are too many that don't have a critical mass of viewers.
I mean, yeah, their goal is the same as any other sector. They are trying to desperately monopolize as quickly as possible. And the irony is that Steve Ratner is basically looking at that and going, yeah, there's a lot of there's too much competition here. So unfortunately, that's what we're doing. I'm no economist, but Netflix lost $18 billion in value yesterday, enough to fund every ass the writers, the actors made for 36 years. I mean, this stuff doesn't translate to direct liquid capital. I mean, or liquid cash. Obviously, it's just like value in the stock market. But ultimately, I mean, it's just a lot of this is just fucking fake money. The only reason their stocks are down is because they refuse to share their numbers regarding streaming services with Wall Street. Yeah, they will never do that because I think that the reality is that their algorithm being a secret is significantly better for them in the long term, regardless of how much they lose, how much value they lose in the fucking stock market.
And as we just were discussing, none of them are making any money. You are already seeing the media, their big parent companies talk about being more disciplined about how much they pay for content, how many shows they put on.
Theoretically, market cap is the sum total of all future dividends minus a discount rate for time value of money. Of course, this is all speculation. Yeah, I mean, I think gearing our entire economy, like gearing every aspect of industry towards like speculation, gambling, and the assumption that a company will be super valuable in the future is maybe not the best idea. You know what I mean? That's my take, though, because I'm an idiot. I'm not smart. I just think, like, you know, you sell lemonade, you get money, and then that's what you do, you know, and then you make better lemonade. I thought that's how they taught it. You know what I mean? That's how they taught it to me in school. Like, hey, you make the best lemonade, you sell the concept that your lemonade tastes better, and then all of a sudden, you're just selling more lemonade than everybody else, and that's kind of how you do business. Nowadays, it's not how you do business. That's never how you do business, especially after an IPO. Once you go public, the business is revolving around the concept of, you know, how many people think you're going to be the best at serving lemonade. Maybe you're not even serving lemonade. Maybe you're actually now maintaining the distribution of lemons. Maybe you're just like trying to aggressively purchase out all the lemon distributors so you can have a full-blown monopoly over that sector, and then you can squeeze out the rest of the competition through predatory pricing. And the government's not going to do anything because the government has decided that the lemonade stand, as long as like the dollar value to the consumer is not aggressively priced and hurting the consumer, the lemonade stand can do whatever the fuck it wants. It can just like start straight up extracting lemons from the global south and utilize child slaves, as a matter of fact. And then the Supreme Court will catch wind of it when some of those child slaves will turn around and try to sue the lemonade company. And then the lemonade company will say, as a matter of fact, we outsourced our you know, global south extraction business to a subsidiary corporation. We didn't know that they were using child slaves. And the Supreme Court will say, no, that's actually perfectly fine and valid. You can totally do that, as a matter of fact. Go ahead. What do you mean? It's not, you're not legally responsible for the extraction of lemons with the utilization of child slaves. Of course, what I'm talking about has already happened, not with lemonade, but with numerous U.S. corporations. Everything I just mentioned is you know, what is currently going on. And obviously you are on the one hand, lemon enjoyers, okay? You're the lemonade drinkers, but also simultaneously you are, in your own personal workforce, the lemonade providers. You're the workers that were, you know, squeezing those lemons at a certain point, and now it's much cheaper to do so. Oh, all right, bye. It's much cheaper to do so with child slaves. So all of a sudden, you still have the cheap lemon, but the lemon extraction industry and the lemonade squeezing industry has either been automated, so you no longer have the job that you once had, or if you have maintained your job by some virtue, by some luck, then your job is paying out significantly less than the lemons that you're squeezing.
Eventually, the competitive marketplace will rationalize it, but it is a brutal, tough competitive marketplace for these companies at the moment.
Well, I tell you what, it's been a day.
Oh, yeah. RFK Jr. explodes. Love to see it.
On Capitol Hill, that heated House hearing underway again on the weaponization of government and big tech censorship. President Biden's top challenger on the left, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is a key witness. And it's kind of ironic that Democrats on the committee tried to censor him today about a censorship topic. They wanted to block his testimony because of some controversial comments that were attributed to him. Watch.
Why would the Republican leadership and the committee majority give a hearing and a platform to the witnesses today, specifically to Mr. Kennedy, a man who has recently claimed that COVID-19 is targeted to attack Caucasians and Black people, but tells the Black community and myself, a mother of 5 Black children, that I should really be careful and not necessarily have the same safeguards to protect my family, my children from a virus that has killed millions of people because I'm Black.
I move that we move into executive session because Mr. Kennedy has repeatedly made despicable anti-Semitic and anti-Asian comments as recently as last week.
Okay, so what that means is they wanted to take it out of the public sphere and put it in an executive meeting room where we wouldn't be able to watch what he said. Well, that didn't happen. They tabled that motion. And then R.F. Kennedy Jr. said this.
If the views that you and others have applied to me, I've attributed to me, if they were actually true, I can see why I shouldn't be able to testify here today. Those are not true. These are defamations and malignancies that are used to censor me, to prevent people from listening to the actual things that I'm saying. And I think, ranking member, that we should have a real conversation rather than an exchange of ad hominem attacks.
You know, I was thinking today, who would cheer this on? China, because that's how they roll. We're not supposed to roll like that.
Exactly. And
Love that. No, totally. Yeah. Oh. It's just like, I nailed it when I said debate purgatory is one of the worst cancerous mentalities that you could have ever unleashed upon Western civilization. Okay, it's nothing else, dude. It's debate purgatory. Debate purgatory has eviscerated modern society. This guy's like, oh, these are ad hominems. Like, address the issue. Awesome. Great. Aya is behind me, enjoying her new chew toy, which is just a stick. Classic.
And what was so interesting to me is he talked about ad hominem attacks there. This entire hearing is Democrats trying to malign, demonize, and push RFK Jr. out of the way. But where did this all begin? Why are we even having this hearing? You go to page, I think it's 8 or 9 of the lawsuit that the judge said, Biden, no, you can't censor people. We're going to stop these meetings from happening. There was a digital director named Clark Humphrey, 3 days into Biden's administration, who sends this email to Twitter. Can we keep an eye out for tweets that fall into this genre? And he sends RFK Jr.'s tweet. Hey, folks, wanted to flag below tweet and wondering if we can get moving on the process of having it removed ASAP. So 3 days in, Biden says, get the RFK Jr. tweet off Twitter. He'd go on to be a political rival.
So, Sean, I try to give people the space and grace to maybe they didn't know that then. Do you think they knew he was coming?
Oh, of course.
Do you
Exactly.
think that they knew he was going to knock on the door to get into the White House and try and possibly run?
I think they had to. And so here's a Democrat candidate who has 20% of the Democrat primary vote. I mean, he's not a small player. He's a huge player in a race against the president of the United States. Number one, but number two, it's a really good point. He's pushing back on the government using agency to have someone else censor in a censorship game that they can't play themselves. It's fascinating. So I love that the Republicans have given him the platform. And by the way, just a reminder, this is what Democrats used to stand for. This is like old Bill Clinton-esque policies that RFK is talking about, not this new.
Literally not even true. Democrats were also very much pro-censorship. I mean, Hillary Clinton was like unironically advocating to like ban video games, like violent video games, shit like that. The idea that the Democrats are the party of censorship is so stupid because everyone's a liberal at the end of the day, which of course means everyone is totally on board with censorship of some sort. Is just like what you agree with, okay? That's it. The notion of like full-blown free speech advocacy is a silly one. There's like only a couple people who are unironically like that, and that's, I would suspect, is like Noam Chomsky and shit. You know what I mean? It's so dumb. Why does anyone think RFJ is a Democrat when Fox News is riding so hard for him? I mean, it's kind of like when CNN is riding for DeSantis to drive some kind of wedge. That's it. And he's running as a Democrat, but he's like most prominently known as an anti-vaxxer. And that's pretty much it. That's the reason. RFK Jr. is trying to make horseshoe theory real. He's not like, what do you mean horseshoe theory? RFK Jr. is not like leftist in any way. The idea that like the left is the censorship party right now in this day and age is fucking funny to me, though. When there is one party who has legitimately legislated away like actual books. The Florida Board of Education yesterday approved a controversial standard for teaching Black history. Florida's Board of Education approved new rules for teaching Black history in the state Wednesday, prompting immediate backlash from critics who described the updated standards as a big step backward. The guidelines follow the state's enacting a controversial education law that requires lessons on race be taught in an objective manner that does not seek to indoctrinate or persuade students of a particular point of view. They're talking about slavery, dude. They're talking about slavery. They're saying like it's fucked up to discuss slavery on terms that it was bad. That's an insane thing. Like they're censoring an accurate retelling of history. I mean, come on now. The updated standards on African American history and instruction include benchmark clarifications to provide additional guidance to teachers on specific topics for instruction. One updated standard has drawn particularly strong outcry, directs teachers to include instructions on how slaves develop skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. They're saying personally, wait, what the fuck is this? That you have to, what? They're saying that you personally have to say, if you're talking about slavery, that like there was some good. There was some good that came out of slavery, like, teaching African slaves how to pick cotton or clean the house. Like, that's an insane way to educate people. Like, both sidesing slavery is so psychotic. Another benchmark clarification under increased scrutiny directs teachers to include instruction on acts of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans when teaching about the growth and destruction of Black communities during Reconstruction and beyond. Among the examples listed as an act of violence was the 1920 Ocoee, Florida massacre, in which dozens of African Americans were killed when they went to vote. But, like, I guess they want to show both sides of the acts of violence. Like, for example, if you were to cover, I guess, the Tulsa massacre, then you got to say, like, well, technically, we don't know for a fact if a Black man whistled at a white woman or not, but that was enough to firebomb the city of Tulsa, a blossoming Black neighborhood. You know what I mean? Now, of course, they already do this. They've already been doing this, but this fundamentally legislates this way of education. White people are really like, we weren't that bad, guys. Yeah, I mean, this is censorship. This is censorship. This is indoctrination. This is an ahistoric retelling of history with the express intent of brainwashing children. It is how you do it. And they're doing it. They're the ones who are book banning. They're the ones who are basically banning an accurate telling of history. You know what I mean? So the idea that, like, this is the censorship, like, RFK violating a private website's clear-cut terms of service maliciously and repeatedly by lying about vaccines, that being the main point of contention with modern American censorship, is so fucking stupid. Okay? The real First Amendment violation happens at the legislative level. And yet, for some reason, Fox News rarely ever covers that unless they're talking about how brave, bold, and beautiful Ron DeSantis is for being a warrior. It's great. Great stuff. A champion against woke culture. You know what I mean?
New left-wing leftism, Marxism that's come from the Democrats.
Actually, I think Democrats are very nervous about RFK Jr. And I was looking at a Quinnipiac poll this morning. He's got 14% against an incumbent in the White House, the Democratic Party. That is a big number. That's double digits. But, you know, Hakeem Jeffries, about an hour ago, made these comments that where I think this is where you see how worried they are. Yep. This is Hakeem Jeffries. Robert F. Kennedy is a living, breathing false flag operation. His campaign is being run by right-wing political operatives who have one objective: take down President Joe Biden. You're nervous, aren't you?
Who's the right-wing operative running his campaign? I'd love to know.
Me too.
So, but that's also something.
He is, man. He's the guy. He's the guy at the helm. You know what I mean? That's it. He's the guy himself. What are you talking about? What do you mean, right-wing operative? What do you mean by that? Like, it's not like Fox News covers Bernie Sanders on these terms. You know what I mean? RCP gives Biden about a 50-plus average. He has a bigger lead than Trump. What are they talking about? Yeah, the irony, of course, is that there is no real thing happening there either. There is no real there, you know? Like, the RFK Jr. Biden situation, or even Marianne Williamson, who's slated to be here soon, you know, versus the DeSantis-Trump circumstances is awful.
Similar to what the left is saying about no labels, the third party. Yeah. They don't want any competition whatsoever, no matter where it's coming from Joe Biden. But the one that really hit me today was when they were trying to tear him apart, some of the congressmen and women who were, you know, had their 5 minutes on the clock. And it was brought up that he was racist and that, you know, the Tuskegee Project, that his comments about vaccines would then keep blacks from getting a vaccine. And it was an emotional moment when he said, you know, my family members, remember who his uncle was, JFK, signed the end of the Tuskegee experiments. He goes, I was already born then. I mean, the legacy of the bipartisan victories in this.
That's so awesome. Just like glazing JFK, RFK Jr. only because they're like anti-vax as fuck. That's so fire. Personally, I do love that shit. Hold on.
Country he's bringing up. He's talking about a time when they all used to get along, and he's talking about his family's sort of place in history. And it pretty much shut the conversation.
Yeah, and it's telling that Democrats would rather attack him personally than actually deal with the substance of the hearing, which was the weaponization of the government against free speech. And it used to be, we don't have to agree with everything that RFK says. We don't have to think that all of his ideas are good. But it used to be that the way that you flesh out the bad ideas is by publicly debunking and debating them. Now, all the Democrats want to do is shut down speech entirely. They don't want to give him a platform. And perhaps it is because they're worried that he poses a significant threat to President Joe Biden.
The collusion is already in the courts, and the Biden administration is already losing in the courts over their attempting to censor social media. So let's talk about facts here versus theatrics.
Yeah. So maybe his rise now in the polls looks like that Jason Aldean song, looks like the Barbie movie. The more you talk about it and put it out there, you're helping him out. Maybe they're nervous about that on the left, too.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.
Christopher Nolan is one of the most acclaimed filmmakers of our time.
DVR, at least they know their fucking audience, you know what I mean? I know. I messed up. I thought I could possibly get her to be tired a little bit, you know what I mean? And I was wrong. Boy, was I wrong. Hold on 1 second. Okay. She ain't tired at all. Now she's more hyper. I won't vote for Biden the liar. Give me somebody else progressive. I will never vote for another wishy-washy centrist. Okay, well, I mean, I don't have to, but I would never tell you to go and vote for fucking RFK Jr., okay? Who has like almost the exact identical positions to Biden, but then is also anti-vaxxer. We need to talk about how Hollywood casts actors with love interests and they have 20-year age gaps. Keep Barbie out of your mouth. No, we don't need to talk about that. That's so stupid. It's called acting. I don't care. It's not real. It's not happening. Please stop. There's no fucking way that this person is real, though, when they're saying that. There's no shot. I don't want to believe it. I don't want to believe it at all. I refuse to believe it. We're not doing that. Oh, my God. Are you going to switch to the fear and camera setup when she gets here? No. Can we mauled about pretend relationships today? They are clipping you probably. I'm not giving them anything to clip. Shut the fuck up is my answer. A New Jersey conman who was pardoned 2 years ago by former President Trump has been arrested again and is accused of defrauding investors out of millions of dollars. That's awesome. Talk about, you know, allowing criminals to roam the streets, the Democratic Party, folks. But guess what? That's not a crime. You know what I mean? That's not a real crime. That's like a rich person crime. You know, defrauding, being a con man, that kind of stuff is usually done by like charismatic upper middle class individuals. So it's usually not like people that are victims of circumstance or anything like that. So obviously that doesn't matter. That's not what we're talking about.
With hit movies like the Dark Knight trilogy, Dunkirk, and Interstellar, he's a 5-time Academy or Oscar-nominated director and writer who pushes the boundaries of storytelling for the big screen. And now, in his new film, Oppenheimer, it's being called, well, his most impressive yet. It features Cillian Murphy playing the title role, that of famed physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, who oversaw the development of the first atomic bomb during World War II. He gave that first test the code name.
I feel like this kind of feels like he's getting away with like promoting his new movie while simultaneously doing it under the auspices of like talking about the strikes. But it's fine, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I feel like that's what's going on, though.
Trinity. And in the film, he is recruited into the role. It became known as the Manhattan Project. He was director by Leslie Groves. Leslie Groves was an Army officer played by Matt Damon. We had a conversation with Nolan about the movie yesterday.
Nolan is DGA. They are not on strike. Yeah, but, you know, it's still absolutely a part of the solidarity conversation. You know what I mean?
And it started with a look at a scene where Groves asks Oppenheimer why another physicist, Enrico Fermi, is placing bets before the first test of the bomb.
He's also Writers Guild. He's not just DGA, he's writer too.
by atmospheric ignition. Well, we had a moment where it looked like the chain reaction from an atomic device might never stop. Setting fire to the atmosphere. Why is Fermi still taking side bets on it? Call it gallows humor. Are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world? Nothing in our research over 3 years supports that conclusion, except it's the most remote possibility. How remote? Chances are near zero. Near zero. What do you want from theory alone? Zero would be nice.
Christopher, thank you very much for being here. A lot of people don't like to think about that, but you've spent years thinking about the power of these weapons and the man behind it. What was it that fascinated you about it?
Well, what really fascinated me about Oppenheimer was looking into the historical reality. His story is just the most dramatic I've ever encountered. The suspense, the twists, the turns, all that stuff. And this seminal moment, the Trinity test, the anniversary of which was last weekend, where they changed the world.
This is a fake scene because I'm not deaf. Yeah, no, that's because that's honestly because they probably re-audio edited it in order to release it for CBS mornings.
Change the world we all live in and the world we will always live in. I grew up in the United Kingdom in the 1980s at a time of real fear of nuclear Armageddon. It was in the pop culture. And our relationship with the fear of nuclear Armageddon ebbs and flows over time. It's almost like we can't worry about it for too long. We get exhausted or something. The problem is the threat never actually goes away.
The human drama of this story is Oppenheimer becomes this public star, the father of the bomb. He won the war for America, saved American lives, but he's acutely aware, along with many, many, many other scientists, that the world has changed. And if an arms race to build ever and ever bigger bombs launches, we're all going to be living a very different life. He tried to prevent it, and he was persecuted politically for it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about his story that a lot of people know a little bit about, but not much, and for me, somebody who knows nothing about Oppenheimer is the ideal audience member for this film, because then they get to be surprised and shocked by everything that goes on. And
he said, spoiler alert, no spoilerino. Don't learn about Oppenheimer before you get to the movie theater.
Film was really an attempt to jump into his head, go through his experience. And the book I'm adapting, called American Prometheus, is subtitled The Triumph and Tragedy of J. Robert Oppenheimer. And it's exactly that. He did incredible work for his country in the war. In a lot of ways, we seem to have...
I basically spoiled it yesterday. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I turned you into a non-ideal viewer. What?
Won the war for the Allies, and then what happens to him in the period afterwards is pretty shocking.
Yeah.
And it's really a cautionary tale about the relationship between scientists, government, and the media.
I remember when this trailer dropped, I was sitting with some friends, and immediately we got excited, of course, a project of yours, but then we started this conversation about CGI and how it would be used in this film, but there isn't any CGI.
No, there's none.
And that was...
Christopher Nolan is so insane, dude. It's like, no, we recreated the atom bomb. I learned about it. It's actually quite simple. You need to enrich uranium if you'd like to do so, or at least figure out a different method. And it's very wonderful. And then we exploded 10,000 tons of TNT, which is identical to a nuclear explosion. And every single PA that was involved is now deaf. Now, many of them are saying that I am also deaf, which is not true. I am not deaf. My ears are actually stronger, which is why nothing happened to me as I stood within hearing distance of the nuclear explosion, the 10,000 pounds of TNT. Why are you saying I'm loud? Why are you saying that I'm screaming? I'm not. This is a simple tone. I'm speaking in a normal tone with a normal volume.
Purposely done. How does that add to this?
And there are lots of explosions.
Yes.
So they're real explosions.
It's really cleverly done, I'd have to say.
Well, thank you. One of the first people I showed the script to was my visual effects supervisor of several films, Andrew Jackson. And he's somebody who's worked with computer graphics, but he's also worked with analog methods, with old-time special effects, as it were. And I said to him, let's try and do this with no CG, because the thing about CG is it's incredibly versatile. You can do anything with it.
Right.
But as animation, as computer animation, it tends to feel a little bit anodyne.
I saw a Twitter thread about how he like bought an entire 50-acre plot of land and then put corn on it just so he could have no fucking virtual effects as you drove through the cornfield for Interstellar. Yeah, he's that kind of guy. I mean, look, I love movie magic. That to me very much is movie magic. Apparently you sold the corn for profit too. You know what I mean? I'm a fan of that. Like I think it's movie magic, but also, you know, share the distribution of profits a little bit better with the people that are making the movies, right? I mean, Cornfield Chase is an iconic scene too. Yeah.
A little bit safe. So when you're making a movie that's textured, that you really want people to be in the room with these guys, to feel like they're in a real space, you need imagery that's going to have what I term that sort of bite, that kind of analog thing where it's a real thing you photograph.
Yeah.
So it can have incredible beauty. And we knew the Trinity test had to be the showstopper. It's the key thing in the film. It had to have incredible beauty and incredible threat. And it's difficult to make computer graphics threatening.
In the aftermath of the Trinity test, the U.S. government takes 2 models of that bomb, of course, drops them on Japan. The war is over. There's a moment of joy, of happiness, of celebration, of feeling like something terrible has passed. But then in the film, there's this incredible scene where Oppenheimer comes to realize psychologically that the really terrible stuff could be in the future.
Yet to come.
The way you portray that is with a scene in which he's looking out at an adoring crowd, cheering fans, and he starts to imagine a darker explosion right there in the room. And the face that your camera lingers on, a face that I don't know exactly how to put this, but is essentially suffering the trauma of a nuclear explosion. It's your daughter's face, I come to read. How did that scene come together?
She was on spring break, and
I think the real victim of the nuclear bomb was Oppenheimer. Let's discuss. The real victim. And also Christopher Nolan.
She's cheap and available.
It's such a heavy
because everybody else in the film
keep
was
it light.
Christopher, there has to be a deeper meaning.
I was going to say, I don't want to be psychoanalyzed on national television, so I resist any personal interpretations. But no, I mean, in truth, you know, not to get too heavy about it, but it's incredible.
I'm going to say that his loss of his own personal family, especially his daughter, would be the most devastating thing on the planet for him, and that's what he wanted to. That's how he tried to personalize the situation.
Incredibly dark part of the film, a dark subject, and I don't want to give away too much for people who haven't seen the film yet going into it, but what we're looking for is his experience in his head. And so to me, it seemed to me that somebody who had been amongst the first people on Earth to witness nuclear fire, they would carry that with them and everything, and any time they're imagining.
I love people still being like, spoiler alert. Yes, dude. Yes, the spoiler is what happened to Japan. So
the consequences of these weapons, they're going to be seeing the people around them, the people they love. They're going to be imagining that effect, and they're going to be able to imagine it.
Okay, this is less interesting to me than this, which is more interesting to me. Oppenheimer's Secret City.